Dr. Mark has spent his life exploring and living his passion, health, wellness, and performance. A three-sport scholar athlete in high school, Mark attended Harvard University where he continued his pursuit of academics and athletics. After receiving his undergraduate degree in psychology from Harvard, Mark went on to study at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro, where he graduated with a Master of Science degree in exercise and sports science. Dr. Mark then attended naturopathic medical school at Bastyr University. These experiences sharpened his insight into health and wellness, both in theory and in practice. Dr. Mark began to question the factors that most influence how people live and often the misguided manner in which people try to improve their health. He came to two significant conclusions. Too much of what we are told changes too often, and our scope of health must be magnified. In 2004, Dr. Mark founded Onvo, a health and wellness company offering program solutions, personalized coaching, and consulting services. As a personal client, I'm very excited to welcome Dr. Mark Adams to Google.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you. And at least from the West Coast time, thanks for joining me on your lunch hour. And hi to everybody. You're over my right-hand shoulder, so if I look at you, that's where I'm looking. I thought we'd start by going around the room and sharing what everybody had for lunch. No. James, you said everybody would be scared about that, right? I want to thank you for having me out here today, and I've really been looking forward to it. I think Google does an outstanding job of supporting your health and well-being, and not a lot of companies do that. So I think that a lot of accolades go to Google. Now, before I get started, anybody here and there not like food? You guys tell me if they raise their hand. Anybody not like food? Okay. I just want to check because I don't want. I might have to ask them to leave the room if that was the case, because I love food. I love to talk about food. And if we think about it, we're going to get into this a little bit, just kind of scrolling through some pictures here. When we talk about food, a lot of things come to mind, but I always like to think about food that really just elicits kind of that yum response. Oh, here, we like those, don't we? And those, what comes from those, right? Grains. How about that? You think we can eat that today for dessert? You guys know what that is? It's strawberry shortcake. It's almost strawberry season. That's why I put in there. But anyway, as I said, I like to talk about food. Three basic main reasons. Number one, no matter who you are, where you live, who you voted for, what your job responsibility is, food matters to every single person in this world. In fact, it's one of the greatest common universal denominators we all have. Okay? Number two, it's this huge Y in the road, or really a fork in the road, to play on words, that really can take you one direction or another. Okay? In the positive way, you go this way, it can be one of your greatest sources of health, joy, and nourishment in your life. You go the other way, go down the other path, sometimes with good intention, or sometimes just out of ignorance, or just you don't care. You go down the other path, well, food can become one of their greatest sources of disease, dysfunction, dissatisfaction, really your life. So it really matters quite a bit. And I love wanting and having people experience food in much more the joyful, positive way where you get what we all kind of want anyway, but we sometimes don't know how to get there. And then lastly, which is I think is really kind of interesting, okay, is that food is a mirror of us. And we're a mirror of our food. Now, what does that mean? Yeah, we build our bodies out of food. But I find over the last several years working with folks from all across different walks of life that how we deal with food is a mirror image. In fact, if we deal with food in a very positive way, very calm way, very joyful way, that really translates and has parallels to the rest of our life. But if we have a bad relationship with food, a negative relationship with food, with a rigid relationship with food, or we're scared of food, or we feel guilty, well, guess what? That shows up in other aspects of your life. So before we get going, I always like to think about not making any assumptions to say, hey, is there a problem? Okay? And if there is a problem, what is the problem? Then how are we going to go about solving it? Well, I'm a big fan that you can always judge what you're doing, no matter how good it sounds, how smart it seems, how effective. What result are you getting? That, at the end of the day, is the bottom line singular measure that we want to know. Am I getting what I want? Okay? And if we look at this, if we think about what we want versus what we got, how many of you want to look better? You want to feel better? You want to perform better? Anybody? Right? Just one, two, three? Okay, got a few more people, right? Well, is that where we're at? Now, I'm assuming you're here today because either you like to soak up knowledge and information, and you're a sponge, and or some combination that maybe you're not 100% satisfied with everything you are personally doing or think you're doing in your life right now. We have what I call this heaviness epidemic in our country. Now, both literally and figuratively. Well, literally, right? Okay, 2/3 of Americans are overweight. Okay, and that number is growing. That little map right there, you don't need to really know much about it, except the darker and the more red it gets and the orange gets, the more the obesity and overweight is growing. And these maps are, I think, if I'm not mistaken, are only about a 25-year gap. Okay, no surprise, we know this. But really, looking around here, most folks here at Google don't deal with that. But also, we translate it to how you feel day in, day out. You think about your chronic health, your chronic illness. 7 out of 10 Americans die from a chronic illness. 2 out of 3 healthcare dollars get spent on chronic illness, okay? But here's what we translate to a little bit, I think, more personal and really more about who we are. It's beyond the heaviness in our waistline, but it's really the heaviness in our life. I love to watch people. Okay, it doesn't take much to entertain me. I could be at an airport, I could be on a park bench, and you just look at people. Maybe you look at people walking around the hallways here. People walk around like with this sense of heaviness, right? They don't feel great. They have maybe lower energy. They're getting tired. They're crashing and craving all day. Or, you know, we're just getting older, and that's just what we're supposed to expect. Okay? That, to me, this heaviness in our life and how we feel, to me, is the biggest problem, not just the waistline, okay? And especially in a hard-working environment where you're going, you're high-performing, you may be at your desk all day, you're trying to get a lot of things done on a deadline, okay? Now, why do we have, so there is a problem, okay? What is the problem, okay? But then we don't have it because there's a lack of information. In fact, we're kind of in this land of the lost, what I call noise and confusion, okay? Problem number one. Everybody seems to be saying something different, right? You've probably had folks up here talking to you through this series telling you a lot of different things. Doctors will tell you one thing. Your trainer, the FDA, your dietitian, nutritionist, right? Your friend, the person next door to you, your mom, okay? Oprah, you know, tells us things this year, next year, you know, something is different from everybody. So there's no shortage of solutions, no shortage of ideas, okay? And here's one thing that bothers me. What we're told changes way too much. Okay? Now, I know from a technology standpoint, there's always upgrades, there's always advancements, and like, what's the next best thing? But you know, here's the fundamental truth about our bodies. Our bodies are designed to function a certain way, and that's not changing. Okay? So why does it make sense that everything we're told often changes? So, for example, I have a little egg here. You can see that. Okay? And say this is, I don't think it is because I just grabbed it quickly at the store this morning, but say this is an organic, free-range, cage-free egg, you know, no hormones, you know, none of that stuff. So we take out all those variables. If we look at the egg, is the egg good or bad? It's good, right? Right? Everybody's confident of that right now. We don't have to go back too far in our recent history to say there's been judgments that have said, hey, no, wait, the egg is bad. Or avoid the egg, or only eat the egg whites, or don't eat the yolk. In fact, if you look over the last 25 to 30 years or so, we've probably flip-flopped back and forth about 2 or 3 times on the egg. So I want to ask you, has the egg changed? What has changed? Our understanding of it, right? I mean, to me, maybe you have kids or a pet, and you're like, okay, no, you're good, you're bad, and the egg is like, am I good, am I bad? I don't know. Make up your mind. It's having an identity crisis, right? Well, the problem is what we know, our understanding, or what I like to say our current knowledge, which is our current state of knowing, changes. So what we're told today about the egg is different than what we were told in the past. And it's not just the egg. So you can imagine from a nutrition standpoint specifically, what you're told from how to eat, what to eat. Can you imagine that it might be different tomorrow than what you're told today? So we've got a couple options, right? Do we wait around till we know it all? I would suggest not doing that because we're never going to know it all, okay? Or are we going to come up with a way to think about things, a framework to give us lasting guidance to where we can harness the natural power of our body toward health? That's what I focus on, and that's what I like to do. Because here's the bottom line. Your body naturally tends toward health if given the chance. Okay, think about that. Tends toward health if given a chance. So you cut yourself. What happens to that cut? You don't do anything. What happens to that cut? It heals, right? You might just wash it and forget about it and never really think twice, okay? So some mechanism in your body is pushing you toward health. Your basic job, your basic responsibility is to kind of push that along or help it go along that way and really remove the obstacles, okay? So the idea with all this noise, all this confusion, I always like to tell people it's almost like your computer. Sometimes we need to hit the reset button. Sometimes we need to wipe the slate clean, reset yourself, and I'm in the notion that, and I'll get to in a second here, that food is one of the greatest starting points that you can start with. Okay. Now, before I go further, I always like to just take a minute and tell you my story a little bit. And really my lessons, not to tell you really about myself, but really because it will help you understand the approach that I take and really how I try to help people day in and day out. Because I think there's some interesting lessons. Anahit gave you a little bit of background. I grew up in the Midwest, big family, sports and fitness. Went out to Harvard, was able to play football and studied there. Didn't really know what I was going to do, but I've always been interested about health and life and performance. At that point, more about athletic performance. Decided to go down to North Carolina to get my master's degree in exercise and sports science, and I was going to focus on peak performance. So I went down, one of the best programs in the country, worked with a lot of faculty members who dealt with working with Olympic athletes, worked with Olympic teams, and I thought that's where I wanted to go. But while I was there, my personal interest just kind of started shifting more to wellness, my own health. Oh, by the way, at the same time, my father at the age of 57 had almost a fatal heart attack, just what seemed like at the time, out of the blue. And I'm like, how could that happen? You know, nothing. There was really no warning signs that I thought, but looking back, obviously knew that. So my interest just kind of like, boom, wellness, my own health, nutrition, going from athletic performance to life performance, because no matter who you are, where you're at, you are performing day in and day out. So I decided to come out here to Bastyr to Naturopathic Medical School. Many of you are probably familiar with it. Wonderful school. Got my ND degree and went through the training. Anyway, the last part of the training at school, we have a clinic that's in Seattle. And it's a teaching clinic, and we'd have people coming in from colds and flus all the way up to AIDS, cancers, you name it, everything in between. And people would either be coming to seek either alternative care or complementary care with what they're doing. And what would happen, we'd have a supervising doctor, we'd have a primary doctor, which is a student clinician, and a secondary doctor, which is a student clinician. The person would come in, so you say you came into the office and say, hey, what's wrong with you? We'd ask what was wrong. We'd go through a case history, maybe do some physical exam. Then we'd all go out of the room, and we put our heads together and say, well, what should we do? We'd type up a treatment plan. And maybe we had 10 things on this list. We go back in the room and we're going to present it to you. And here how it kind of pattern repeated itself a little bit. Number one, eat better. Number two, I'm simplifying a little bit. Two, sleep more. Three, you need to exercise and be more active. Number four, reduce some stress in your life, will you? What can we do? But then there's almost this like, but I know you're not really going to take the time and effort to do that. So number five, what can I give you? And that happened enough times, and I'm like, well, how is that different than anything else? How am I going to try to fix you, right? And I understand, please understand, I'm not dismissing. It's a teaching clinic. I know why. But for me personally, kind of where I am and what I want to do and my interest, I'm like, that just kind of bugged me. And I'm like, well, wait a second. What if we just don't give up on the top of the list? Because if we're saying these things have the most impact, why can't we tell people, why can't we go up to the top of the list, help people do those things more, not perfectly, but better, and then maybe you don't need 5, 6, and 7. Because it's a pain in the rear end, right, to get sick, to deal with disease, illness. We saw the stats there a little bit while ago. So it's obviously much better, harder, but much better to take care of yourself, okay? So I came out of there with not only seeing this process happen over and over, but also too, from just again, I was not immune to the idea that, well, what about this diet? What about that diet? What about this fat? Or what about this? Or even what we learned in school and the textbook sometimes changed. And I basically decided I needed to start from scratch. Here I had completed 11 years of school, 3 different degrees, and I'm like, I just need to start from scratch because you know what? I'm frustrated, I'm confused. So I understand when people come to me and they're like, I don't know what to do. So I just started from scratch and I asked myself 2 basic questions. Okay? How is a human being designed to live? And how do you get the most impact? Those are my focusing questions from the very beginning because I learned very quickly that it's so important to have a framework that you understand, that you believe in personally, that will help you guide decisions. Otherwise, you're going to be all over the place. Okay? So now, developing kind of the approach that we work with people over the last 7 years, and as I said, these are people like you. They want to feel better. They don't want to be okay. They want to be better. Some people have serious health conditions, but they just really want to perform better day in and day out. So our basic philosophy is very simple. Nourishment gives us life. Movement expresses life. And relationships are the meaning of life. Everything in my world and how I work with people in the framework can kind of fit in that. Guess what? We start with nourishment. That's why we're here today, right? Well, why? Is it just because that's what I like? No, remember, this is how is a body designed, how is a human being designed to function and live? How do we get the most impact? You get the most impact with nourishment, and specifically nutrition. Why is this the case? As a human being, we have 0 capacity to create energy. 0. Think about that. Okay? Don't go into a lunch coma on me. We have 0 capacity. What we do have the capacity to do is receive, transform, and redirect. So we are wholly, entirely dependent on external sources of nourishment, including food, but not just limited to food, to give us life. So I would say a little bell should go off our head and say, well, ding, ding, ding. Those things should be pretty important, okay? And in fact, they are, not just in theory, but in practice, okay? So our principles of nutrition that we develop and have worked with in the framework that I teach is, number 1, eat real food. That sounds like really interesting, doesn't it? Okay. Number 2, honor your hunger. And number 3, find your rhythm. All 3 are essential. The biggest mistake I find most people make is that they think, number 1, it's just about food. And if I figure out the food, everything else will come. It will help quite a bit, but it will only get you so far. The hunger and the rhythm piece will tie things in where all these things work together. Now, I'm going to try to squeeze in the time we have left. Really what takes me, what I teach in a 28-day program, I'm going to try to squeeze in the next 20 to 25 minutes or so. And give you a little bit of taste and overview about how we want to approach this. Because these seem great, these seem interesting, but they're like, okay, what does that mean? But there's a lot of things behind it. So let's break them down just a little bit, and we'll focus on real food a little bit more than the others. Real food. Anybody have a good definition of real food? Yeah. It provides nourishment. But a Twinkie provides nourishment. Yeah, it does. Not positive nourishment, but negative nourishment, but it provides nourishment. Because if you were going to be on a deserted island and there's a crate of Twinkies floated up on the beach, would you not eat them? I would not. You would not eat them. Good, okay. But you should belong to our club. That's good. No, but the idea, nourishment could be positive or negative, but yeah. Okay, any else? Any other definitions? Natural, not processed. Okay, that's good. What does that mean? So natural but not processed for those who can't hear. Yeah?
No plastic wrap.
No plastic wrap, okay? Stuff that grows. Yeah, good. Okay, you guys are kind of on the right path. So what we like to say, when I say eat real food, notice I didn't say diet food. Yeah. Notice I didn't say health food. Okay? Real food. We have some basic kind of definitions that we talk about that we try to teach, okay? Can I hunt it? Can I pig it? Can I fish it? Can I harvest it? Right? All these old world food categories. Did this food exist before 1900? I don't break food down into pieces and parts. So when I work with folks, I don't talk a lot about protein. I don't talk a lot about fat or carbohydrates, okay? So let's take an example, okay? Water bottle. little support here, okay? I'm going to test you, okay? So we have a water bottle that has a nutritional label, okay? Those of you who aren't here, we've all seen this. So let me ask you something. How many calories in water? 0. Okay, because we're looking at the nutrition label, right? So she said 0. How many? You need your glasses. How much protein? 0 protein. How much fat? 0 fat. Carbs. How many carbs? 0. Okay. Can you do the math for me? What does that add up to? 0. Okay. So here we go. We've identified, we collectively have said we have a nutrition label. Calories, fat, protein, carbs, and maybe a few other things. We've collectively identified these to be the most important attributes to decide what we put in our body, right? Fair enough? Right? We all know like how many calories that have we're looking at labels, how many protein grams, right? I think we even have some labeling around here like that. So here's the thing though. We would be dead sooner without water than food by a long shot, not even close. We could go weeks without food if we had to, as long as we had water. We could only go days without water. We're seeing that in different parts of the country, different parts of the world right now, that there's shortage of water. So here's the thing. A little bell should go off in your head and say, well, ding, ding, ding. Maybe those numbers don't tell me everything I need to know. And they don't. I'm not saying they're not interesting or amusing or useful from time to time, but I actually believe, and we've seen, that breaking food and dissecting it into pieces and parts, calories, fat, protein, carbs, I believe has been one of the worst mistakes we've made in our culture when it comes to nutrition education, trying to get healthy, because we dissect and disconnect from the food. Dissect the food down, and we get disconnected. We don't know what food is anymore. Some of you are a little bit ahead of the game, but this is where we get into diet food and health food, okay? But hopefully we go down and we look at the ingredients and we say, well, what's in there? Hopefully it just should say water, right? So the idea, and this is where it becomes problematic if we take this next step forward. Now that we've identified those numbers look sexy on the label, we start manufacturing food to meet those numbers. And that's where you get into a lot of diet food and health food. So obviously we want to focus on the positive, but if we think about real food, the negative is that we want to avoid foods that have been processed. There's only 3 fundamental ways food gets processed: by addition, subtraction, and modification. We either add something to it, we pull something away, or now in this day and age, this whole genetic modification, which to me is a very scary thing, because we are fundamentally changing the DNA genetic sequence of food that does not happen in the natural world. Right? There are going to be consequences. But does this make sense? If we have real food, can I hunt it, pick it, fish it, harvest it? What are these food categories real quickly? Fruits, vegetables, meats, nuts, seeds, beans, legumes, right? Dairy, eggs, meat, fish, seafood, that type of thing. These are real food. So either we change that by adding some things, pulling it away, or modifying it. Okay? Case in point, a couple examples. Okay? In this day and age, there's quite a few corn, soy, wheat, and rice byproducts. Okay? This is where we teach people to look at the ingredients. I personally don't care what the top of a nutrition label says. In fact, I tell people, if you can, not to look at it, because it's going to just throw you off. The front of the label, number one, food without labels is better than food with labels, right? But the front of something, the packaging, whatever it says, doesn't always tell us much. The back, the top of the nutrition label, I don't really care. I want to know, is it real food, is it not? I want you to look at the ingredients. So when we look at food, you'd be surprised. Go home to your pantry, go to the grocery store, go to health food stores. You will see things that are basically corn, soy, wheat byproducts, rice byproducts everywhere. So by definition, these foods have been changed by addition, subtraction, modification. Okay? And here's something I'll remind you at the end, but you need to do the hard work to figure this out and believe it yourself. But when we eat food that's been changed, bad things happen. Okay? Remember we said nourishment gives us life. Okay? So when we eat food that's been changed, bad things are going to happen, yeah, to our waistline, but it will happen to our life. That's what the degrees of disease, dysfunction, dissatisfaction I talk about. So it's not just, oh, no big deal. It's mostly healthy. I'm not eating very many calories. I'm eating enough protein. It's really more about the food itself, okay? Enriched or fortified foods, okay? This is a red flag. If something says it's enriched or fortified, survey your mind, kind of all those foods, what that might be. I go, well, what happened to that food that it needs to be enriched and fortified? Because I'll tell you what, real food naturally comes enriched and fortified. So something's been processed and changed that they need to do that. And typically, enriched and fortified foods are enriched and fortified with either like synthetic chemicals or materials or not the sources of those actual foods. So for example, I always say it's kind of like when we process food, it's like Humpty Dumpty kind of falling down, and we're going to take Mr. Potato Head parts and try to put them back together. It just isn't going to work, okay? We're going to create some problems. Low-fat foods. I took this picture, I think it was down in Portland, I believe, walking by. I love ice cream, just so you know. I always like to put that out there because people think, oh, you don't have fun with food. I wouldn't want to live in a world that I can eat ice cream. Okay, so you know, I always look at signs like this, but this is for a yogurt stand. Okay, I like ice cream better than yogurt, just personally. But you go through, it says real. I'm like, oh yeah, healthy, non-fat. Oh, because low-fat foods are processed foods. Of foods that naturally have fat in them, we remove the fat. You fundamentally change the nutritional makeup of that food and how it's designed for your body to deal with it, break it down, and nourish you. Major cause of crashing and craving. With folks I work with, I don't let them eat low-fat foods, or I highly suggest they don't eat low-fat foods. Okay. Here's the interesting thing: when you eat low-fat foods, you will have probably a higher chance of being fat. Okay. I know that's a big statement, but we talk about why that's the case. And so I always tell people, you have permission just to like never have low-fat foods again, okay? And who likes those anyway? Genetically modified foods, we talked about that. Sweeteners, additives, chemicals, flavor enhancers. This is just kind of a broad, generic category. Lots of chemicals in our food, okay? And I use MSG as an example, okay? Now, we all know who eats MSG in here? Nobody goes out and says, can I have some MSG, right? Just a little history of it. Introduced in 1947. It's a cytotoxin, so you can just kind of get all these crazy things going on with your body if you have too much of it. We all know not to have that, right? Restaurants say no MSG. Foods say no MSG. That's not the problem, right? So you think you're avoiding MSG. But if you look at your ingredients, and we basically have a test that says, hey, if a 10-year-old can recognize the ingredients from start to finish, it's probably real food. Okay, so you see these categories of food. Well, MSG is, if you see any of these categories in the ingredient list, MSG is always in there. Okay, some of those, like, does a 10-year-old know what those? I don't know. There's a lot of health food and diet foods that have those ingredients. Okay, now also too, you think you're avoiding MSG, so these foods often have it. I'm not going to go through that list, but we try to stay away from things that might have maltodextrin in it, for example, is one of the big categories. Natural flavoring. Do you ever get something that says natural flavoring? What is that? If it's natural flavoring, why don't they say it? It's a very vague term, so this is where truth in labeling comes out. Well, it doesn't automatically mean it's bad, but it can be because there's no defined definition of what it is. So usually I get kind of cautious where I'm not going to always avoid it, but if I see natural flavors, I'm like, man, that's not something I want to have all the time or as a staple, okay? So when we talk about food, eat real food. This is the foundation. This is the cornerstone. Because once you have an understanding of what real food is and a framework, it becomes very easy. One of our goals, anybody golf in here? Okay? Or you watch golf and you see they get up to the hole and they're getting ready to putt, and the golfer's kind of looking around and looking at all the angles, right, to get the best angle and best shot. Well, when I work with people, I have people do that for a little while, but long term, you don't want to have to do that the rest of your life, right? You want to be able to have a framework in your mind that you can filter all the onslaught of information coming at you, things that you see that you can say, be like a triage, real food, not real food, not real food, boom, 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 where you don't have to expend the mental energy. So we teach people a framework to really think about this and really these broad, lasting, and very specific definitions. That's the starting point. And it's just a starting point. But once you've got that, you can check the box because that will never change the rest of your life. And it's the only way that you can have a chance to do number 2, honor your hunger. Okay? Most people think about hunger in this country, and I think a negative way. We have commercials on TV. Take this pill. Take this herb. Suppress your appetite. Here's the funny thing, though. Hunger is not bad, even though we have an avoidance behavior, like avoid getting hungry. Hunger is not bad. In fact, it's normal. It's part of normal daily physiological function. You breathe in, you breathe out. You should eat, and you should get hungry every day. Okay? When we're not eating real foods, or we're taught to eat a big breakfast, eat before you work out, eat after you work out, eat every 2 or 3 hours, where we're always eating, we're not going to get hungry. Most people, because they do not eat real food, number 1 up there, you will crash and crave. Up and down. Blood sugar levels go up and down, especially probably being in a work environment where you kind of go, 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 and you're like, what happened? I need something. Let's go out and get something. Now, Google does a great job of providing some really good things, but there's also some things around there that are going to contribute more to our crashing and craving, right? So here's the thing. That is not hunger. It's crash and craving. I'm not discounting it because it's actually real physiological distress. It's not a lack of willpower. When we're not eating the foundation of real foods most of the time, we're going to be like this all the time, and then we're going to have to medicate. We're going to have to reach something, medicate to stabilize. And like I would give my right arm right now to have some food, that type of mentality. And in the long run, that's going to get closer, you just day by day, closer to the disease, dysfunction, dissatisfaction that we all talk about. So what we find when people eat when we eat in the context of real food, okay, not diet food, not health food, you get more stable, more steady, more consistent energy. And over the course of time, if you don't eat, you gradually get more hungry. But you don't die, right? You don't just fall off a cliff. Whereas how many of you think, okay, I better eat now, or I better eat before I come. I know it's lunchtime, so it's a little bit different, but I better eat now or before I go in this meeting because I'm not sure I can make it through the next 30 minutes or an hour without food, right? Why? Again, just the way we're taught, the way we're conditioned, but also the context of real food, okay? How many of you are getting a little tired right now? You just had lunch. Either I'm boring you, or number 2, here you're sitting here just eating food, and eating food is a highly energetic process where when you eat food, you go into digestive rest and digest mode where all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm getting sleepy. I wish I could lay down. When's the worst time to have a meeting? Probably right after lunch. So the people, when you get done with this, I feel sorry for the next folks, right? You're going to be like, oh. And you might be fine normally, but again, it's an energetically demanding process. That's crashing and craving. What happens when we allow people to get hungry is when you're hungry, you're kind of in a high performance mode. So I worked with a trainer one time who told their clients, show up hungry. Because hunger is hunt mode. I want to think about that. So what happens when you eat food and you get bogged down, the last thing you want to do is really perform. Okay? But when you're hungry, in the context of real food, not crashing craving, you still have plenty of energy. I'm hungry right now, but notice I'm not like, oh, I need to sit down because I'm just going to about collapse. I'm energetic, I'm alert, I'm engaged, and that's possible. So what we try to do with people is, again, teach them this process of real food hunger. So number 3, you can personally find your rhythm. Okay? What does that mean? Rhythm's kind of a strange word, but it's appealing in some ways. But it means types of food. Some of you we know do better with more meat, more grains, less grains, more dairy, less dairy. You all need to eat your vegetables because Grandma was right about that. So there's the types of food. Okay? Anybody vegetarian in here? Okay, we got a number. Anybody love meat? Okay, what if we cross you and say, we're going to make you do that and you do the other? You wouldn't like that very well, would you? Everybody has a personal rhythm that they do best with. So the types of food, the timing of food. Some people do really well, in fact, do much better not having breakfast in the morning. And I know we're told, eat breakfast, it's the most important meal of your day. But for some people, that's the worst thing they should do because it's going to upset their rhythm the rest of the day, and they do that day after day, and they're going to be just out of sorts. For a lot of people, I think dinner's the most important meal of the day. the way we have our culture, society set up. And so the idea, find your rhythm is the types, the timing, the frequency. It's like your individual blueprint or fingerprint that makes sense for you. That's why sometimes all these diets and all these fads, there's elements of truth that sound interesting. They appeal to a small segment of the population, but maybe not to you, or maybe partially to you. So what you need to do is have a framework. Again, I always go back to the importance of having a framework that you believe in and understand that will help you filter and guide your decisions. And what we try to do is with this three-prong or three-principle approach, where all three are important, is to give you a framework that will never change the rest of your life. Real food will never change, no matter what, no matter how smart we get. Okay? On your hunger, find your rhythm. Those three things, this is a lasting framework that will never change, that applies to every single person in here. Yet because you understand what your rhythm is and you start to experiment about what foods you do better with and timing, you're going to experience that uniquely just for you. And that's kind of a cool thing. And you can just stop playing the game of like, okay, what ride are we on? What's next? Okay? So we start with food. As I said, we start with what we eat because we believe it does change everything. Not just your waistline, about how you feel. One of my favorite quotes. I'll read this to you. I know you can all read, but pretend this is story hour. When I was young and free, my imagination had no limits, and I dreamed of changing the world. As I grew older and wiser, I discovered the world would not change, so I shortened my sights somewhat and decided to change only my country. But it seemed immovable. As I grew into my twilight years, in one last desperate attempt, I settled on changing only my family, those closest to me. But alas, I would have none of it. And now as I lay on my deathbed, I suddenly realized, if I'd only changed myself first, then by example, I might have changed my family. From their inspiration and encouragement, I would have then been able to better change my country, and who knows, I might have even changed the world. Look where this is written. In a tomb in Westminster Abbey, 1100 AD. I love this because this is just as true today. Here's my corny part of this. You guys all have gifts. You all have talents. You all have abilities. And if you are not your better self, your best self, you are always going to feel dissatisfied, falling short personally, and also the people around you, whether it's work, your family, your relationships, they're going to suffer for it too. Okay? Now, here's what's happening. Here's what I know as we wrap up here, and we'll stick around for some questions for those of you who want to stick around. When you eat food that's been changed, bad things happen. And if you're sitting here today and you're not kind of sure what to do, what's going on, I'm a big believer of this simple idea. You truly do not know what's wrong until you allow your body to do what's right. You know what's right about every single one of you? Your body naturally tends toward health if given a chance. No budget in the world is big enough, whether as an individual, as a family, as a corporation, if you don't give health a chance. And the only person that can do that is the person that you look in the mirror every single day. We can have other people support us. We can have them support us at work. But we can't look to other people. We can't look to agencies, experts to do the work for us. So I always tell people, just what if, this whole idea, your body tends toward health if given a chance. You need to give your health a chance. So what if just for today? What if for a couple days? We ask people to commit to 28 days. But what if you give your body more of what it needs, you take away what it doesn't need, and you just step back and you get the heck out of the way of yourself? Think about that. Just what if? Very good things will happen. Not just in your waistline, but in your life. You'll be smarter. You'll be more creative. You'll be more generous. You'll be more giving. You'll be closer to the person you know you want to be, and you are. Does it all relate back to food? Not all of it, but a heck of a lot. And we're fortunate, we get to see this every day with folks where they do this. And I tell you, and this is what I'll leave you with, I don't want you to trust me. okay? Because we all get lots of information. You need to be the judge. You need to decide for yourself because you need to find what works best for you. So here's what I suggest. For a couple days, for a week, for however long, reset yourself. Just start from scratch. Forget everything you know. And start with food. See what happens. You'll be surprised. Any questions? Yeah.
So, tofu.
Tofu. Oh, yeah.
Real food, and it is not. There's some other examples of foods that generally would be considered to be healthy.
Oh. It's not real. Okay. So usually most tofu is processed soybean, often from. Oh, I'm sorry. I need to repeat the question. So somebody asked about tofu and if it's real food or processed food. So tofu is typically made out of soybeans. Typically soybeans, 85 to 90% of soybeans are genetically modified. Red flag number one. And also tofu is processed in a way that's not that violates our addition, subtraction, modification. Soybeans itself are edamame, great. But if you were going to eat soy, like the fermented soy sources like tempeh, miso, which is in the traditional Japanese culture, those are the sources of soybeans that would be better. Okay, lots of examples. Okay, here's one. Okay, I brought my last prop here. Okay, bread. Did bread exist before 1900? Yeah. You're like, thank goodness. Did bread and butter? Yes. Okay, good. But what type of bread? Okay. Well, here we have bread. We read the front of the label, right? If you guys can see that, 100% stone ground whole wheat bread. Is it real food? Should we eat it? You know that's a trick question, don't you? Well, here's the thing. We like bread. But if you're going to buy this, you're not doing yourself, if you're going to buy this as a staple, you're really not doing yourselves any favor. I'll give you a quick little, we don't have necessarily time today to get into all here's the whys in this session. But here's a quick little tool to go out into the world to judge your bread. If we would blindfold you and go into the grocery store or just line up all this bread in front of you, we blindfold you and we hand you the bread and you start to squeeze it. Remember that commercial, don't squeeze the Charmin? Any of you guys remember that? Okay, don't squeeze the Charmin toilet paper. If you can squeeze the Charmin, you just need to kind of put it back. Okay? Okay. But if you all of a sudden, I'll get to that in a second, but if all of a sudden you're squeezing and you squeeze bread that's hard, you want to open your eyes and actually look at it and do the ingredients list test where you look at your ingredients. Soft crusted bread, okay? Grain's a big one. Grain can be very, very good or healthy for you, but it also can be very, very negative and not so healthy because it's not just the grain itself, it's how it's processed or changed. Soft crusted bread is usually made with commercial yeast. Quick rise bread, okay? So it shortchanges the process. It changes the glycemic index probably by about 100 and 125 points compared to what we call old world crusty bread, the kind of bread that you see at the markets or that if you cut and you don't eat that day, they spoil. You look at your ingredients test, okay? This oil, this bread has about 6 lines of ingredients from high fructose corn syrup, yeast, which we saw sometimes can contain MSG. It has vegetable oil like canola oil and soy oil. Those are very not so good oils, even though they're touted as health food oils. They're very highly processed oils. Okay, there's a lot of things here that a 10-year-old can't recognize and pronounce, let alone me. And so we look at this, and if we were just judging it here, we'd buy that. Okay. Now it doesn't mean you can't go out to like the baseball stadium or football field, and every once in a while, if you have a hot dog that's in a white bun, no big deal. Okay, but if you think you're buying that as a staple and doing something good for yourself, that's not the case. Okay, so breads, granolas, rolled oats, granolas, bars that have rolled oats in them, instant oatmeal, certain things, health food, diet food, very irritating on the gut, inflammatory. We're not getting the nutrition out of it. So grains by themselves are very packed with nutrition, but it's all how you handle them to access the grain. Most grains that we have in our society with the cereals, breads, crackers, and certain things, and flour-based are not prepped the right way to give us nourishment, as you say. Okay, I'd love to I spent a whole session on grains and dairy because grains and dairy I think are two of the most misguided, and I call it two of the most violated forms of food we have. We mess them up quite a bit. Great, yeah, good question. Greg, very good question. Yeah, no, good question. So the question is, how do you consider basically cooking and food preparation? Yeah, that to me is not fundamentally changing or processing. So I'm not saying go out here and go eat raw or go eat some raw meat and everything. So our traditional, you exactly said it right. The traditional methods we have for preparing, storing, preserving food that have been around for thousands of years, those are not fundamentally processing the food. We can overcook food, though. We can overheat food. In fact, pasteurization oftentimes, because it's high heat, kills the bacteria, right? But it also has collateral damage in the negative ways it fundamentally changes the nourishment of the food. So that's a whole other topic, too. But you're right. So the preparation, food prep methods, they can be prohibitive, but for the ones that you're talking about that have been around, that's the way to go. That's what we've been doing for a long, long time. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I know we're running short in time. Yeah, let's go back here and we'll come back since you just. Yeah, good question. Because there's a lot of them out there. I like to keep it simple. I have 3 fats and oils that I love to, or kind of my go-to. Okay. I love butter, number one, just real good butter. I'm like president of the butter fan club. It's good source of butter. Not afraid of it whatsoever. If I'm going to cook, if I need no heat or low heat or maybe even modest heat, a great source of olive oil I think is the way to go. Now, if I'm going to cook over high heat, meaning like stir frying, high prep, one of the very best and healthiest oils you can possibly consume is organic, extra virgin, unrefined, got to be those things, coconut oil. Okay? And coconut oil, if you grab it, you look at it, it's hard at room temperature. You pop it down. I make popcorn out of that. I stir fry it. It's just kind of my go-to oil. And I don't even like necessarily coconut, but you can find oils that have more or less of a coconut flavor. Your canola oil, your sunflower, safflower, your vegetable oils, your soybean oils, okay, very highly processed. I call them supermarket oils. Contribute a lot of problems to our health condition. That's another idea too. Like I said, I don't focus on protein, fats, carbs, calories. I don't even focus on fiber, starch, saturated, monosaturated fats because we know the food categories. If you eat the real foods, those things can take care of themselves. Our body actually does well with having certain levels of various fats from mono, unsaturated to saturated fats. In fact, we need that for healthy brain function sometimes. It's just, if you'll find that, I don't pit food against each other because I wouldn't want to pit the vegetarians against the meat eaters in a fight, right? I don't pit food against each other because that's part of your rhythm. I'm more concerned not about the cross comparison, but what I call the vertical comparison in the food pyramid that I use, that I want to know how changed the food is because every food category can be changed. So we take an apple over from Yakima. I have a client who brings over a bushel of apples every fall, and sometimes it's picked that very day. That's what I call a zone 1 or a real food. But we can take that same apple, process it, refine it, add some high fructose corn syrup, some food coloring, put it in a jar. All of a sudden, that becomes a very highly processed food, even though it says apples. Okay? Every food category can fall along those levels of whether they're real or not real. That's the tricky part. Okay. Yeah. Anybody join us from afar have questions?
Can you repeat what the 3 oils you recommend are, please?
Yeah. Butter. Really good butter. Number 1, as they're yelling out here. Olive oil. And when it comes to oils, spend your money on olive oil. You kind of get what you pay for. It makes a difference in not only the source of nutrition, but also the taste experience. So spend your money. Sarah, who's our food and nutrition coach, she kind of recommends buying 2 levels of oil. A really more expensive kind to save and use for special occasions or certain dishes, and more of a mid-level oil that's still really healthy, but also you can use it more day-to-day. So butter, coconut oil, olive oil, and then coconut oil. The coconut oil, and this is how it needs to be, extra virgin, unrefined, and organic coconut oil. Those are the 3 biggies. There's a few others that are out there, but those are the 3 big ones that I think are are the way to go. And they handle our situations. Okay, yes?
Have you used mustard oil? You have not done mustard oil. So that's what we traditionally in Indian cooking use mustard oil.
Mustard oil. Do you know much about mustard oil, Sarah? You know, I don't have like much experience, but I'll look at that. Okay, I would say if it's been traditionally used, that's a good sign. If it's been used for more than 50 or 100 years, that's a good sign. Okay, well, yeah.
High heat cooking.
High heat, yeah, high heat cooking. That's a tricky one. Yeah. Salted or unsalted? I personally like slightly salted butter. Okay, big fan of sea salt or slightly salted butter, but sometimes you can get unsalted butter and add a little bit of sea salt. Okay, and it all depends on what you're putting it with, because sometimes if you're adding it to something that already has some salt content, or you're adding it as a recipe, you might not need it. And otherwise, I want to thank you for joining us today. I know it's not always the easiest thing to come out in the middle of your day, but thank you. And please let us know if you have any questions. We try to answer them the best we can. Okay? Thanks so much.